Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another Breakfast with Blaha, and today I'm having Greek yogurt and frozen cherries. Alright, let's talk a little bit about good morning, as this is something I thought I should clarify, because there's a couple different ways that we can go about programming the good morning. And one of my novice clients who's seen my stuff about getting our good morning as strong as our box squat, he said, yeah, I need to get my good morning up to that point as quickly as possible. And while I appreciate his enthusiasm, I think the way that we need to look at the good morning is understanding which sort of training philosophy we're using with it. You guys have seen at least one of my clients hit a 500 plus pound good morning on camera before that I put in a collage. You guys also saw a couple of them repping out well past 300. Like in that one collage I did a long time ago, I had at least two clients in that collage do more than 10 reps with 350 or more. Okay, I've got some guys who move some big ass weights on the good morning. You guys have seen me do in the mid 500s on it. But I think we need a context for that. When we push the good morning like that, it really is part of the conjugate system. Meaning we're number one, we're box squatting. Pushing the box squat is our primary squat. All right? And the carryover, that's tremendous. We're number two, doing very, very little deadlifting. And that's one of the big differences. Is that's going to determine if we treat the good morning like an accessory movement, where we're just chasing a pump with moderate weight, versus if we're going to hit really heavy lifts on it, and we're going to push the bleeding edge. And a couple of things to think about with that. So if we're doing box squats, it's one of the big perks of the good morning. It teaches you how to box squat. It teaches you how to push all the way back. Now when we box squat and we push our hips all the way back, we often do so more than we can do on a back squat without a box. But that's the idea, right? That's the idea. That's how the exercise works. Good morning teaches us how to do that. It trains us to do that. And if we get used to handling really heavy weights on a good morning, it transfers to the box squat directly. And the box squat, if we learn to box squat correctly with correct forward lean, which again, the good morning teaches us, and it teaches us how to do it with real heavy weights. And it keeps us from getting stapled, right? That's an important consideration here. So if we're focusing on the box squat or running conjugate, because we're only doing speed work and max work then on squatting, that good morning teaches us to be able to have that deep forward lean on the box squat with a really heavy weight. I mean, if you can good morning 500 pounds, you're not going to have a problem with that, right? You're going to be able to get that deep forward lean and maintain that back position without your back caving. Especially when you push the hips back and the knees stay at the ankles with no knee slider further back. Also get to use it as a heavy hip hinge to reinforce that, because we're not doing heavy squatting outside of max day. And we're only maxing on some sort of box squat or something once every 1 to 2 weeks, and everything else is lightweight speed work. So the good morning fills the gap. Fills the gap there. And if we can box squat that way, we can learn to box squat correctly, it will transfer to the back squat. In other words, if you can box squat 500 pounds with forward lean, using that good morning position and knees all the way back, and keeping the bar mid-foot without again, the chest collapsing because the back gives out, you will back squat more than 500 pounds, guaranteed. You're going to back squat 525, 530, maybe 550 when you go to a back squat, even without practicing it. But what happens if we're back squatting instead of box squatting? What happens if we're back squatting with some volume? and we're not running conjugate per se. Well, the good morning is a heavy lift gets de-emphasized. Number two, we don't deadlift much on conjugate. The good morning starts to become our primary hip hinge. We're doing supplemental deadlifts maybe. But what are we usually doing? Rotating a lot of conventional and sumo. All right, we're rotating a lot of conventional and sumo, doing mostly speed pulls with, depending upon your rotation, a max deadlift once a week or once every 2 weeks. But then we're just doing light speed pulls. We don't have a heavy hip hinge. See where we're going here? The good morning replaces that. If we're deadlifting with any type of volume, it's too much to do both. It's too much to do both. So if you good morning in an environment where you're doing any volume deadlifting, it's going to have to be treated as a secondary exercise. What does that mean? We treat it almost like a bodybuilder movement. You can't be pushing maximum weight. We aren't worried about, hey, can I push the bleeding edge? We're worried more about, can I get that extra range of motion? Can I get that stretch? Can I get a pump in my low back and my hamstrings? We're using it purely as a pure hypertrophy exercise without as much concern for that movement carryover. We're going to use a lot less weight. Because number one, you're not going to do both. You're not going to do heavy good mornings and heavy deadlifts for reps in the same week. Okay? Not going to happen. So where are we going with this? If I have a lifter who's still a novice, right? They're not doing conjugate novice. I'm going to treat the good morning as just a volume exercise. I'm not going to push that bleeding edge on it. I'm just not. If I have a lifter who's running a 5-3-1 type training, something like that, because again, conjugate's not right for them. What are we going to do? We're going to treat the good morning like a pure hypertrophy exercise. In other words, we're not going to treat it as a big primary barbell lift. We're just not going to do that because number one, we don't benefit quite as much from doing so. Number two, we don't have the recovery to spare on it, right? We don't have the recovery because we're actually doing some squatting and deadlifting if we're doing that. The good morning is a big, heavy movement. You're not going to have the recovery to handle it. So when I talk about the good morning in the context of when I talk about getting really, really strong at it, I'm usually referring to inside the conjugate system. And it needs to be clarified that I'm being very specific with that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.